The why behind standing up for myself in the lawsuit is truly because of diversity of thought.
It's your First Amendment rights. It's freedom of
Yes,
speech.
it is.
This is cancel culture.
Correct.
In real time, before our very eyes.
Correct.
And you stood against it.
And I was shaking to walk back in that building after the suspension because I knew even more people hated me then for my opinions.
You went into the lion's den.
But the only reason I was able to is because of the prayer that my dad made us recite at that moment.
Welcome to the Stacks Cast. I'm Eric Stakelbeck. We are in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're here with the one and only Sage Steele. Now, Sage is a podcaster herself. She's nationally recognized speaker. She's going to be an author soon, and also, of course, longtime top anchor for ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports. Today, we're going to talk about that experience with Sage, cancel culture, an issue a lot of our viewers have been concerned about, Christian conservative viewpoints being shut down. And Sage, I would say she was a victim of cancel culture, but folks, she's anything but. She has gone above and beyond to overcome the efforts to cancel her. Sage, thanks so much for joining us here on the Stacks Cast.
Thank you. What a nice intro.
Hey,
thank you.
Well, you
know.
deserve it. And you were so nice to come here, by the way, and brave the elements.
The blizzard of Nashville.
The blizzard of
2024.
Nashville, 24, like 8 inches here.
Oh my gosh.
And you've braved the elements, you've come down, and we really appreciate it.
It's an honor. When I, started to communicate with you and your team, it was really an honor. I think that's one of the best parts about being canceled from my prior life, I guess, a couple months ago, is that I wouldn't have been allowed to do things like this.
Yeah.
And that's why I think there's so many blessings with it.
You've got the freedom. And we were talking before we came on camera, Sage, this is a new season in your life.
Yeah.
And God has great things. You're just getting started. As crazy as that sounds, after 16 years at ESPN, you're just getting started. Okay, we've got a lot to unpack. And we want to unpack the ESPN situation, obviously, what you're doing now, what's in store, cancel culture, your experience with that. But let's start with Sage, the woman, and your background and where you grew up and what brought you, first of all, to ESPN? I know you're kind of an Army brat,
Yes.
I guess you would say.
Yes.
Your dad's an amazing guy. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yes, a proud Army brat. By the time I was 11, I lived in 4 different countries. So all I knew was change and moving and adjustments and meeting new people and true diversity, where I lived in Belgium, for example, for 3 years. And, to my left, they spoke French. To my right, we had a Norwegian family down the street. They were from Turkey. We spoke English. Kids figure stuff out. You just want to play kickball.
Kids are resilient.
They're the best. We're the ones that screw them up. So it's honestly that I thought that was normal, though, moving and constant change. And this is in the 70s and 80s when, there was no internet.
Right.
And so in order to keep in touch with your friends when you're little, you have to, write a handwritten letter and snail mail across the pond,
Yes.
So Panama is where I was born. My dad went to West Point, went back later to coach at West Point, plebe freshman football. Yeah. While he was there, Mike Krzyzewski, one of his classmates from West Point, was also an assistant coach with the Army basketball team.
Coach K, that's right.
Coach K, Coach Knight,
that's
all
right.
The ties are really awesome.
And Coach K was Coach Knight's protege back in the day, that's right.
Coach Bill Parcells was a football coach, one of my dad's coaches. There's a lot of cool ties from West Point.
And your dad's kind of a West Point legend and a
Yes.
barrier breaker at West Point. Tell us about that.
The first black man to play varsity football ever at Army, West Point. And he
Very
was
cool.
All-American. He was big tight end. And at that, you think back to the 60s, mid-60s, for a 6'6.5" man, that's a big guy back then.
Yeah.
Now all the tight ends are about that size, right?
They're all
But
Gronk.
50, 60 years ago, it wasn't that way. And then was actually drafted by the Detroit Lions in the 17th round.
Hey.
Even though back then, there was no chance for you to go, skip your 5-year commitment to a service academy and go play like what happens now. Mm-hmm. It was wow, that would be cool. And onward, I have an obligation to my country. And he ended up serving 23 years, retired as an Army colonel. But during that time, so it was Panama, West Point, Indianapolis, back at the old Fort Benjamin Harrison, no longer exists. Monterey, California, Fort Ord, where they sent him to the Defense Language Institute to teach him. He had to learn Greek fluent in 10 months. Greece for 2.5 years, Belgium for 3 years, Colorado Springs for 5 years, Indiana, went to high school, and then college, and then 20 more moves with TV.
What about journalism? Why sports broadcasting now? I think you ran track in high school?
High school, though.
In high school
That's
you
it.
did.
And I was
so you weren't like a
average.
huge sports person per se.
I was a huge sports fan.
Okay.
And 2 younger brothers, my father, who was an athlete, my mom was athletic. Living in Europe, it was hard. You only had one English-speaking TV station in the 80s. So on Saturdays and Sundays, what was on? It was always, during the football season, it was always Cowboys. That's America's team, right? Cowboys were, despite the drama.
Well, you're talking to a
constantly.
Philadelphia Eagles fan, but
I
okay.
know.
I'll let it slide.
The accent, you guys. Like, oh my goodness. But Cowboys Redskins at the time was just the biggest rivalry, right?
It was.
We always saw that.
Yeah.
In the NBA, Lakers, Celtics. So on weekends, what was on
Great
TV was those games. And so I grew up around that. And then I was 11 when I told my parents I wanted to be a sportscaster.
Wow.
The stories in the book someday are going to be
And the book's coming. We're going to hold you to that.
good. Yeah, you need to push me. It's a hard process, but I just love those times. I love the struggle.
Yeah.
And it was 11 years of different jobs in South Bend and Indianapolis and Tampa and then DC, Baltimore, before I got the call from ESPN. And so number one, no one can ever say I didn't work and struggle and get a ton of rejection and question and cry and run away and then pick myself back up. Many stories along the way that there was a major fork in the road where, am I gonna face the fear or run away? And I faced it more times than I ever dreamt of, But I will say this, I got the call from ESPN in 2004. I didn't go until 2007.
Wow.
I actually turned down the first offer.
Really?
After that being my dream my whole life. Yeah.
Wow. What was the reason? Can you share the reason?
I was pregnant with my second child,
It's a good
very
reason.
pregnant.
Yeah.
I had a 21-month-old at home. I knew I wanted more, and Stuart Scott,
Of
the late
course.
great,
The
awesome
legendary.
sportscaster.
Yes.
Yep, he died of cancer 9 years ago. I can't believe it. He was a dear friend of mine, and I always say this when I speak publicly about him because people see him as booyah and like all of the. Stuart believed in me before I believed in myself.
Wow.
Stuart pulled me aside. He didn't even know me that well, but we had the same agent at the time. He pulled me aside. He's like, listen, make sure you're ready to come to ESPN.
Really?
You'll get eaten alive, and especially as a young mother. Again, different time. And you were not celebrated for that back then, not even close. And so I knew that I would have to be all in, and I was afraid that I would not then have a third child as I wanted, because I was trying to get through number 2 here.
Amen.
And so I prayed about it, and I didn't tell anybody until I told them, my husband at the time, my parents, my agent, and I said, I'm not going to take it. And they looked at me like, you're crazy. My agent.
I'm sure your agent in particular.
Oh, she was like, you're being stupid. I love you, but you're being stupid because ESPN doesn't need you. You need ESPN. And you're gonna get blackballed and they're never gonna call you back. Are you prepared to take that chance? And I just had been raised in such a strong family, knowing that that's what comes first.
Yeah.
And if you sell out for that, I just knew that I'd always regret it. Because I knew I wouldn't want to get to ESPN and still have kids based on the environment and our culture at that time. They might say the right things, but behind closed doors, what decisions are they making if you're the pregnant girl on national TV? So turned it down, took a chance, signed another contract at Comcast Sportsnet, Mid-Atlantic and DC, Baltimore.
Yeah.
And signed for 3 more years, had a third kid, and they called back in 2007. It was the best. It's probably one of my more proud moments because I had to actually practice what I had been preaching, what my parents were preaching. And if I was told by a trusted source that it's not a friendly environment to go to the worldwide leader while you're still having babies, again, a very long time ago, then how could I go there? How could I do that and always regret not having more kids? So it's one thing I can publicly say I'm proud of.
Yeah.
Is that I chose my family, always.
Amen. Always, always. I think everyone watching right now will be inspired by that, Sage. I mean, took a total leap of faith. It was almost like a dream deferred. I mean, it was
Yeah.
your life, the worldwide leader, ESPN, and to say no and put your family first. Sadly, many people in your shoes would not have done that.
And I understand that. I do.
But you did the right thing.
For
and
me,
yeah.
I did, and I try not to judge because there's a lot of other people who have different reasons and legitimate fears. It was a legitimate fear that they wouldn't call back. And I also got better though. Like I got better at my craft.
You honed your craft.
During
yeah.
those 3 years. I really did. And I
So
knew
true.
I knew, listen, I had been talking to people there from about 2000 on until I got that offer and sending them tapes and getting constructive criticism and feedback. And they'd say, this is what you need to work on. At one point, there was a really good talent office there that would help you and tell you what you need to do and work on, especially in local TV and to get there.
Yeah.
And there were 4 years, it was 4 years of them telling me, here's why you're not ready. Here's why you're not ready. Here's what you need to work on. So when they did call, and then I said no.
But you know what? Those 3 years, so many reasons, but you honed your craft. At the end of the day, it's God's timing. He brings
is.
it back around in His perfect timing. I know me personally, I want it now. I want it yesterday, and I want it now. But God sometimes says, hold on, I've got something better. If you wait these 3 years, it's going to be better. You're going to get better.
Yeah.
So, and that's exactly what
It
happened.
was awesome.
And you had to take that leap of faith again at ESPN 15, 16 years later, after you finally come on board in 2007. By the way, I remember watching you in D.C., Baltimore.
No way.
Living in the D.C. area, Comcast Sportsnet, yes. So,
Wow.
and then recognize you on ESPN from my D.C. days. But, okay, you go to the worldwide leader, anchoring major events for 16 years, one of the main faces on ESPN. When do things start to unravel for you after a highly successful career at ESPN? When do things start to take kind of a sour turn?
In hindsight, I can look back to the network changing, like in 2016 after Trump won. Because that's when people started to
Yeah.
get really vocal, and I was confused because that wasn't allowed. We weren't supposed to talk about politics or give our opinion. So why all of a sudden our, on-air coworkers of mine speaking so publicly and so negatively?
As a viewer and a sports fan, it was a noticeable shift.
Really?
I'm saying, you know what, sometimes you just want to escape. Sports is the great escape for many
Yes.
Americans. We can tune out. I cover politics, world affairs all the time. I want to just watch the game, yet I'm getting left-wing political diatribes on ESPN. So you working there obviously saw it up close.
It was hard, but then there were no repercussions on those people. So I remember sending one tweet in particular. I retweeted something that ESPN had tweeted, and it was Bucs receiver Mike Evans, who it was the Sunday after the election, and he took a knee, and it was a big deal. Everybody's, oh my gosh, taking knees all of a sudden. And they interviewed him afterwards, and they weren't tweeting ESPN's Twitter. They weren't posting about his stats that night or the result of the game. It was him talking about why he was kneeling, which has nothing to do with the game. So when they tweeted it out, I thought, wait. And then his answer was he just thought it was so wrong that Donald Trump had won the election. And ends up he didn't even vote. So that was, a lot of athletes were like that, where they would say things, but you didn't actually, if you were so passionate and didn't want him to win, sometimes it wasn't about Hillary winning, it was about not wanting Trump, right?
Yes.
And vice
Still
versa
is.
for many people. You're absolutely right. It's always the lesser of the evils, it seems like what's the least painful for many. And so go do something about it, but to do nothing, sit on your hands, not vote, and then complain, and then publicly as a public figure, take a knee, make a statement. I had a problem with that. So I retweeted it, and whoa. But I retweeted something my network tweeted. It wasn't like I'm trying to stir the pot. But that was the beginning for me, my first time really upsetting people with my opinions. And I was like,
Did they know you were conservative at the time? Your
Yes, word had
coworkers,
gotten
colleagues?
Word had gotten out. I will say this, I never, ever once during my time at ESPN, not once in almost 17 years, talked about my politics publicly. I never said who I voted for because it wasn't anyone's business.
Right.
And by the way, it has nothing to do with how I do my job. Doesn't. So I never, ever discussed it on any social media platform, on our airwaves for sure. I'm a journalist. And I think they're
Imagine that.
right. So that was then. Times have obviously changed, but they allowed it. So that was the first one. And then things happened. And then it came to a head, and September, October 2021 when I went on the Jay Cutler podcast. And
Tell us about that. Now, I mean, like you said, things came to a head there. But Jay Cutler, obviously former quarterback, Chicago Bears, most notable in his career. But basically, you questioned Disney, ESPN, Disney, the parent company of ESPN, of course. You questioned their vaccine mandate.
Yes.
And you weren't the only one. And secondly, you made remarks about President Obama, former President Barack Obama. You are biracial, of course. He's biracial. And you said, well, look, he claims he's a black man, but what about his white mom, his white grandmom who raised them, which I think were very valid points. But that you made these comments, and I don't want to take the words out of your mouth, Sage. I'll let you unpack it more. But that created all of a sudden kind of an internal firestorm at ESPN and daggers coming your way from outside of ESPN. Tell us more about that and that whole experience.
With the Obama thing, I was actually just retelling a story from what happened when I was co-hosting The View in 2014.
And you
Barbara
survived
Walters.
to tell about that? Wow.
4 times I did it. I know. Would I go back now? Absolutely not.
No.
Would they invite me? Absolutely not. It's mutual. It's fine. But at the time, I mean, again, ABC, ESPN, both owned by Disney, same umbrella. So
Right.
it was a natural thing. And Barbara Walters brought up Obama. I never brought up Obama. They were like, why are you so passionate about saying that you're biracial? I said, well, that's what I am.
Right.
And so if I'm asked, as the ladies of The View did that day in 2014, so almost 10 years ago, I'm going to say yes. Like you're showing a picture of my family behind me on the screen, live studio audience and national
Right.
TV, and it's my white Irish Italian mother and my black father and us 3 kids who happen to be 50% of each. I have always said that I felt so proud to be part of such a diverse family where my white family loved me as much as my black family. Like, that's what America is turning into, a melting pot. And I've just, people get in trouble for saying they don't see color. Obviously, you see it, but you don't let it dictate any way that you live your life, speak, believe, nothing. So, I think I was just innocent and sheltered because of how accepting and diverse and tolerant the military was coming up.
Sure.
So when she asked me that question, Barbara Walters on ABC on live TV, and said, well, what about the president? And I said, well, what about him? She goes, well, he was raised by a white mom, and he says he's black. And I said, I think it's interesting that he has a white mother and a white grandmother who raised him. His black father was nowhere to be found. He wrote a book about this. This is not breaking news. He's talked about that loss.
That's right.
I said, I think it's fascinating to completely not identify with the white side when there was a lot of love there, and just to focus on, just to say you're just black. However, you do you. I'm going to do me. That's what I said to Barbara in 2014, what I said in the podcast in 2021. Yeah. I am grateful for my entire family. I always say the joke that I'm pretty sure my white mom was there the day I was born. And so why would I?
She's involved in that a bit.
She was. Why would I not celebrate my entire family?
Yeah.
Because I said I guess my words about Obama, even though I was repeating Barbara Walters, in 2021, it hit different. And I was crushed. And then the headlines were Sage Steele says Barack Obama shouldn't identify as black, and she hates her black father, and blah, blah, blah. Like the mainstream media, there's a reason why it's not trusted and why it's despised.
That's right.
And my experiences through the years, but especially at that point, I always say to people, I always said to athletes, like, I understand why you don't trust us. And then I was on the receiving end of that for sure. So saddened me, but the Obama thing, listen, he's one of my dream interviews. I hope someday that I can sit down with him he knows what I said, and because it got to be kind of a big deal, but it's more about just being tolerant and accepting of however someone, listen, we're allowing kids in my daughter's school in suburban Connecticut to call themselves a cat for a day, okay?
The furries.
Yeah, the furries. The furries are accepted in Avon, Connecticut.
Yes,
so guess
they are.
what? If you want to say that you're all black and not pay attention to your white side or vice versa, you have that right. Yeah. I respect it. But I also think, wait a minute, gosh, why would you question me then when I'm just proud of my I'm not picking one or the other. They're all important. So it devastated me that I was, viewed as not being proud of my black side or my father or being hateful towards blacks, which is what
And you and your dad were
Black
tight,
Twitter
or are tight.
are very
Yeah,
tight.
we've talked about
yes.
this.
So that was that. The other part certainly was the vaccine.
Yeah.
And
It's looking pretty good in hindsight now, your
Right?
comments, right?
Isn't that funny?
In 2024.
how quiet everyone is about
Yeah,
it.
very
The thing
strange.
is, in order to keep my job, I had to get it. And
Yeah,
I waited to the very last second, the last day,
yeah.
in order to be fully vaccinated by the time the September 30th, 2021 deadline hit. What did you need, 2 weeks after getting the shot to have it fully in you?
Yeah.
Great. So I waited till that day to do it. And I had been praying about it and I was ready to walk. I literally was like, this might be it for me because I don't trust what's in it. It's just, at that time, it was happening too fast for me. Eric, I
Absolutely.
did my homework. Like, I knew
no doubt.
that the FDA takes an average of 6 to 9 years to approve a vaccine. How fast was this shoved through?
6 to 9 months.
Right.
If that.
And it became political. And it didn't matter if it was Trump or Biden. It was all being forced on us. And then, with no explanation and no just reassurance. And most importantly, again, I did my homework and I knew, wait, these pharmaceutical companies aren't being held accountable. Like, you can't come back at them for any reason if there is a vaccine injury. For them to completely not have any responsibility, and that's how it was presented when we were told to take it, it just made me scared as a mother as well. But I had to take it in order to keep my job. And on the podcast, I just said, Eric, I had the Band-Aid on my shoulder still when I said it.
From getting shot.
Because I had literally come right from there and I'd been crying because I didn't want to do it and came on the podcast. I should have taken it off. I didn't even care. I was angry for sure, but listen, I'm a pro. I know what I'm saying, what I'm not saying. So when he brought it up, I said, I think it's sick and scary for anyone, any company, to tell you what to do with your body,
To mandate it.
to force it. And I said, but I work for a global company, Disney, and I'm not surprised. I just don't think it's right. But here I am because I had, I'm the sole breadwinner. I'm divorced. I have 3 kids that I'm 100% responsible for financially. Their father's a great father, but financial, it's all on me. So I had no choice. I felt I didn't in order to support them. And I just was honest while complying. So I can have an opinion if I'm complying.
Well, everyone else at ESPN does about various political topics, but from a left-wing bent, you came at it from the other side and you caught...
And then the phone calls began and my agent said they're livid and if you don't apologize, then you'll be fired. And the bosses called me and said, one boss in particular, and said how you can't, what did he say? You can't whack the company, you whack the company. I was like, what do you mean? I can have an opinion. They're forcing me to do something in my body, but I took it. Leave me alone. And they said no. And if you don't apologize, and then we're gonna suspend you, and then then they followed up my forced apology with, while we respect diverse opinions and thoughts, but then you're gonna silence me. So it was the darkest time in my life.
And I want to talk about your faith, too, and the role. You mentioned prayer a few times, Sage, and the role that played in getting you through some dark times and kind of turning points in your life. But real quick, just in watching ESPN, I've seen ESPN hosts over the years criticize the parent company in terms much stronger than you used. But it seems to me there was a double standard here. Did you feel that way?
That's why I sued. That's why I filed a
Tell us
lawsuit.
about that. So finally, enough is enough, and you went the legal route. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and I saw my colleagues, even while I had an active lawsuit, I believe the timing was, yes, because when Roe versus Wade was overturned, I think it was the day of the NBA draft, right around then.
Yeah.
And we had our hosts going on NBA shows, emotional, in tears about Roe v. Wade being overturned and saying how wrong it is and how it's going to, we're going to cause the death of women. And
The Handmaid's Tale and all that stuff, yeah. And you were still there at ESPN. You had to kind of witness this and...
on an NBA show to talk about that, on women's college basketball,
Right.
on First Take, on all of these platforms, giving their opinions on these non-sports topics. I got in trouble for giving my opinion on an off day, on a separate podcast, sharing my thoughts on my experience as a biracial woman, that's my personal story that I can share. And I shared a story about, Obama from 9 years prior. They were fine when Barbara Walters brought it up to me.
Right.
And then also about the vaccine that I took, but had hesitation in doing it and just shared it. So the double standard was shocking.
Shocking. It's
Shocking.
unbelievable.
But you know what it did? It helped prove my point. It helped.
Yeah.
That's why I got a settlement.
Yeah, I'm sure
with
your attorney was
Disney.
like, keep it coming.
They kept, it's like on a platter.
And no one was reprimanded for these, pro-abortion comments, frankly, that ESPN host made. A host of other comments during the George Floyd riots. We can go on and on and on. No one reprimanded.
None. And that was the thing. I was the only one ever disciplined. Why? Because they knew where my politics leaned, even though I never said it.
And this is coming from kind of the big bosses at ESPN, left-leaning, and that's probably an understatement.
All of them. And then, again, when Disney's your parent company and how they have made it very clear where they stand on issues, you can't even go to Disney World anymore. Mickey Mouse, when you walk in, doesn't say, "Hi, boys and girls." You can't say boys and girls anymore. But you look at it and I think, by the way,
That's insane.
it's ridiculous.
insane.
And it breaks my heart because to me, there's so much joy at Disney. That's how I grew up. That's how my children grew up.
Yeah.
The product for our whole lifetime has always been incredible.
Yes.
The movies, it was wholesome.
Fond
It was a
memories.
safe place
Yes.
to plop our kids down when we needed to go do a load of laundry. You know what I mean?
100%.
And those times have changed. Recently, though, it's interesting that CEO Bob Iger admitted recently that they went too woke. But why? Because it affected their bottom line.
Exactly.
So the only reason there was an admission was that. My thing was you cannot pick and choose who you allow to speak and who you allow to give their opinions on our airwaves or privately, which mine was, off the airwaves. You can't pick and choose. Either it is allowed or not. And I push hard, and this is the why behind standing up for myself and the lawsuit is truly because of diversity of thought.
Yes.
I have led with that.
It's your First Amendment rights. It's freedom of
Yes.
speech.
It is.
This is cancel culture.
Correct.
In real time before our very eyes.
Correct.
And you stood against it.
I just knew that I had to. And
You had a lot on the line.
everything on the line personally.
3 kids, a sole breadwinner. I mean,
And the career, that I
career.
loved, the job that I adored to the last day.
and folks, she's great at it, by the way. If they haven't seen you on ESPN, I mean,
Too late now.
It was your
but-
life. No, but better things are in store.
Oh, for sure. But yes, this is my story. This is my why. This is why I got here. And I do need to make one clarification because I've been killed on social media where people saying First Amendment doesn't apply to employment, which is true. Here's the key. In the state of Connecticut, there is a different statute. And so you are actually allowed to be critical of your employer if you are complying with the rules set forth. So I didn't know that. I just was speaking. But when they then crushed me and canceled me and made me apologize and took me off of a bunch of events and the continual punishment, we realized
Some big events.
big
by the way.
events.
I mean, large sporting events.
I hosted the Rose Parade for years, and then that was gone. I mean, there were a lot of things, but
Just coincidentally, I'm sure.
of course. Then
It was just a blatant double standard. Thank God you went and you
but I
filed
just
a
don't
lawsuit.
want you or anyone to think that like, oh, this is woe is me, because I'm beyond that.
No, I think everyone listening, watching right now can see you're not that kind of person.
Well, I hope so, but if not, then I actually let go of that too. Like I can't control. I no longer
This was
want
justice.
to control.
This was justice.
It was, but this is for people I don't know. This is
Amen.
for so many millions of people who feel silenced and who are told it's okay, be you, identify how you want.
Your truth.
All of your truth,
Yeah.
unless what? Unless you're a little more conservative, unless you're a Republican, unless you're all those things, unless you have a different opinion about any of it, Roe versus Wade, about how about the transgender in sports issue right now?
And Leah Thomas, the
Give me a break.
University of Pennsylvania swimmer. Talk about that a bit. Look, you wanted to not remain silent about that issue, and there was pushback there too, right, at
Yes.
ESPN, which came out, which had a very pro-trans bent, I would say, ESPN.
Yes, and I don't even, I know for a fact that all of the people who are making the decisions at ESPN, they don't believe it.
Really?
No, many
So
do.
they're not ideologues.
Many do. Well, many are. Many do believe that, but many don't. The thing is that people are afraid to stand up. And
Yeah.
I get it. Oh my goodness. I am the poster child for why to stay quiet. You know, when you repeatedly get canceled. There's that. Obviously, there's another side to it. But
You are the textbook case of cancel culture, in my view.
yes,
100%.
yes. But what I found, and this goes back to the prayer and the faith part, what I found was every time I got canceled, which was several, I woke up the next morning and I actually, while suing one of the largest companies on the planet,
Yeah.
a true David versus
winning.
Goliath thing,
And winning.
I still walked in that building with an active lawsuit and did my job because I loved it and I was proud of it. Like I mean it when I say I adored my job. It was my dream and I did it and I loved every moment. But I while I'm suing them, I'm still on their TV screen every day. That was scary and
my
it
gosh.
felt awful.
How did you do it? You have an active lawsuit against this company, yet you're still there every day hosting shows. I mean, I'm sure
For
hostility
16
from some
months.
of your colleagues for 16 months.
Oh, a lot of
What
hostility.
was, I'm sure you had to pass by your bosses in the hall once in a while in Bristol and your colleagues, obviously.
Well, the colleagues attacked me publicly, and we're allowed to do that. And that was another thing part of my lawsuit, where you're not supposed to attack. That's that ESPN on ESPN Crime or whatever company.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to do that.
And then you're on set with these same
Yeah.
colleagues.
And they allowed it. Here's the part that I hope. I know you will. I hope your audience appreciates this part, because my faith is what got me through it.
Amen. Tell us more
This
about
is where
that.
I know I can't cry.
Yeah. No, you can. You can. It's all
I
good.
haven't cried yet today, so I guess it's overdue. When I got suspended and pulled off the air, 2 weeks later, I got COVID pretty bad. So that was the irony of the whole thing. I got your shot, and now I'm bedridden,
Yeah, you
and
got
here I
it.
am. And I,
Also insane, by the way.
right?
We were sold a different bill of goods, but that's another story.
Yeah. I was alone for 8 days. My kids went to their dad's house, and I was very sick, and at the same time was being crushed and canceled. And this is after I was made to apologize, et cetera. So talk about a low point. And I remember one night, my heart, 3 a.m, was like racing. It wouldn't stop. And I thought, is this because of the vaccine? Like, am I dying? Like, it sounds dramatic, and I was alone. And so I realized I needed to go to the hospital. So I hadn't showered in a couple of days because I couldn't get out of bed.
Of course.
So I went to take a quick shower before I go to the hospital, and I fell over. I was so dizzy, I fell over. And I realized that if I got in the shower and fell again and hit my head or something, no one would find me. I didn't have my kids. I wasn't married. My parents lived in a different state, and my dad has a couple kinds of cancer, and no one could afford to be around me. And then some didn't want to be. So I just remember I just got back in bed and was like, I just prayed and said, I hope I wake up in the morning. Because I didn't, the heart thing was crazy,
Amen.
And I woke up, and every day got, a little better. It was just crazy that it was happening at the same time as I was being lied about and
Attacked.
crushed publicly.
Attacked.
Yeah. And then when it was time for me to go back to work, my parents said, forget it, we're coming. And they lived in Pennsylvania at the time, and they got in the car, and my parents are now 77 and 74. And again, with the chemo treatments with my dad, et cetera, they came for their little girl. Doesn't matter how old we are, right? We're still their little girl or boy.
right.
And a couple other things had come out, and some lies and some articles that broke me. And they literally lifted me off the ground and then stayed with me. And the day I went back to work was my mom and dad and my best friend, Tiffany, who's also my makeup artist, who makes me look presentable. And my dad went back to his football days. He's like, huddle up. The 4 of us got in a huddle. And I was shaking to walk back in that building after the suspension, because I knew even more people hated me then for my opinions.
You went into the lion's den.
But the only reason I was able to is because of the prayer that my dad made us recite at that moment. For any Catholic watching, or non-Catholic, but it's St. Michael the Archangel.
Mm-hmm.
And to protect us from the wickedness and snares of the devil. And he made us recite it in our football huddle. And I got in the car and I drove to Bristol and I walked in there and I did the first show. And every single day from that moment on, when I drove into the parking lot, I always waited to the last second to put my mascara on. I put my mascara on when I'm listening to sports talk radio, last minute ideas that I might have. And I call my mom and dad and we'd recite that prayer every single day until the day my lawsuit was settled. And I never walked back in there again. Wow. So I did feel protected every day when I walked in there.
The armor of God.
I literally,
the full armor of God you were surrounded in.
Literally.
In the lion's den.
Yes. I walked in there and I envisioned myself in a bubble that was like warm and friendly and like a nice...
A Jesus bubble.
Yes. Because the outside was not so friendly. But I felt myself protected to only allow good energy in and to try to like serve with good energy coming out and keep smiling and focusing on the good. Because there were good people. There were people who came up to me in the bathroom quietly whispering, saying, thank you. But they couldn't say it out loud. But that prayer, when you envision what that prayer is about, it saved me. And what an awesome memory for me to have with my parents. And even if even if my dad was in the hospital getting his treatment, we would stop and he'd tell the nurses to give him a second and we'd do the prayer for 60 seconds. How blessed am I to, number one, have that kind of a family who stood by me, who taught me that. And then to be able to be mature enough, that's what comes with age, right?
That's right.
To receive that and to keep walking in there, but to never back down because I knew what I was doing was right, number one, and number two, that the amount of people that I was hoping I could help by standing up, because I knew once I sued, my career there was going to end. And that broke my heart too. But it was worth it if I could help others. And it sounds cliche, but the number of the thousands of emails and DMs I got during my suspension from people in different countries who didn't know me, but because Disney was involved, saw the news and said, thank you. And I didn't realize this is just this little girl who wanted to be a sportscaster who all of a sudden, by standing up, is like known. And I was like, I didn't ask for this. What am I?
We've compared you to the biblical heroine Esther, who God called for such a time as this. And Sage, God put you in this position, this very difficult position, but he was with you.
The whole time.
Those prayers worked. And it sounds to me that it was larger than just a battle in the natural, in the physical. The Bible talks about, the Apostle Paul says, hey, we're battling spirits and principalities. It sounded like an all-out spiritual attack, not only in your professional life, but a very bad case of COVID. You're isolated, you're alone, trying to deal with this. And like you said, you're in the pit, and God reaches out and surrounds you with your family, takes you out of the pit and says, I'm not done with you yet.
Yeah, it's very...
It's inspiring.
It's very emotional though, because I do sometimes think, gosh, why me? Why is he taking such good care of me? And am I, you question if you're deserving at times. And then it's just like, okay, this is what's supposed to happen and I'm here. And I will say that because of that, because of being able to survive that, which again, I have perspective. I didn't have a terrible disease. I have such love around me. I have 3 healthy children. Like, I am beyond blessed. And that's why I mean it. I'm sensitive to...
But it was a trial.
It was. And I don't want to minimize
the
it.
Stakes were high. It was a trial.
But I know people go through more. So I try to just maintain perspective. But I do feel now that besides being a mother, like, I know why I'm here. Because God gave me the strength to not run away. When I wanted to run away, oh my gosh, scared to death. But to stand up, stand tall, and speak out, that is the beauty of what has happened since I left ESPN, is for the first time in my life, I've just been able to truly be me and give my opinions, because my peers were always allowed to, because they fit the narrative, and I wasn't. So it's been a little scary, because every time I say something or do something, I think, oh gosh, which Disney boss is going to come choke me out because I'm saying something.
You don't have to look over your shoulder anymore. It's liberating.
It's beautiful, and I'm so grateful for that, because it is about I just believe this is the only way that we're going to turn this country around, is to be able to have conversations.
Yes.
And like I don't on Twitter, the hate and I've had death threats, I've had terrible things
It's
because of my
depressing.
opinions. It's so scary. But I won't even respond to those who are really ugly, and in particular a lot of race baiters who I know, who I used to work with, whatever. I won't even respond to them because they're not willing to have a conversation. I also don't believe that they have any semblance of faith in them. I'm not judging. I'm just saying your actions are actually very loud and making a statement. And I don't want to, why would I go to onto some social media battle with someone who has nothing in their soul?
Right.
Like, that's a waste of my energy. I'm already tired.
True.
Why am I going to give it to
Take
them?
the high road. And you know what? You're a light in the darkness. And you said, sometimes I feel unworthy about the position, how God has blessed me. But I think, Sage, I think everyone watching, listening right now can tell you have a humble spirit. There's a great humility about you. Despite all you've accomplished and being on air on ESPN for years and years, you have a humble spirit and gratitude towards God. And He's going to continue to bless that 100%.
I feel that.
100%.
I do.
And some of your colleagues, the race baiters, the ESPN you mentioned, some said you weren't black enough. You
Yeah.
even experienced that, which is insanity.
So that's when, that's when it really began, was in 2020 when that happened. And I was
George Floyd.
Yeah. So COVID. So
Yeah.
we were locked down in March.
Yeah.
George Floyd happened like May, Memorial Day weekend, I think, and then ESPN was having a special race and sport, and like that.
I remember.
Yeah. And I found out because the people who were behind making sure I wasn't on the show were bragging about what they did, which was to go to management and say they wouldn't be on it if I were on it because I wasn't accepted by the real black community.
Yet your dad's the first black football player at West Point.
Doesn't matter, Eric, it doesn't matter. It's about how you, to them, it's about how you act, how you think,
Politics, it's ideology, your ideology.
how you speak, how you talk. My husband at the time, my ex-husband is white,
Yeah.
like that. So I'm a sellout. So you're all of these things. And so, but I said, I went to my bosses when I found this out. I said, what is this? And well, let me do an investigation. And there was never, one person said it didn't happen. Here's the key. As a woman of color, you're not going to have me on that. Like, why wouldn't, knowing I have
You
different
should
opinions.
be celebrated.
But that's the, but again, it's almost the hypocrisy in it. I guess all black people are supposed to think the same, which is actually an issue that sometimes it's promoted within the black community. That's a problem.
And you
on
called
the
this out
outside.
recently with Al Sharpton. You said,
course.
go away.
You don't speak for me just because we have similar skin color. You don't speak for me.
Right.
Of all people, you don't speak for me. And for you to think that you do shows such just selfishness and narcissism, So when I brought that up to the bosses, they didn't acknowledge it. But then when a reporter called, because things leak, and then I had to make a decision then too. Do I run away from this because I know what's going to happen with my colleagues and peers and all of the social media verse? Do I go silent, or do I push this out there and say this is wrong to say because I'm not black enough? What is that? And so my agent and I, who was incredible at the time, we put out a statement, and again, it was about diversity of thought. And the people who said who got me kicked off, they released a statement as well. In the statement, if you look at it, there's not one acknowledgement of my accusation. Because why? Because they did it. They instead focused on something else and how there wasn't enough space for everybody. If somebody accused me of something that I didn't do, what's the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to address that and say, that's a lie. That's not true. But they ignored it because it was a fact in ESPN. So shame on them. But how about the leadership that allows anyone to dictate who's allowed to be on a show based on their opinion of what's enough or what's good or what's bad or what's diverse or what's accepted? So that was a huge turning point when I knew that I had to stand up and say, no, you cannot preach diversity, DEI, tolerance, equity, and all these things, and then silence me because I don't fit into your mold of what a black woman is supposed to be.
It's injustice, and you have a good habit, Sage, of standing up against injustice, in my view. It's unjust what's happening on college campuses, even at the high school level, where biological males who outweigh, stronger, taller than females are kind of commandeering their way into female sports, and they're winning. It's just a complete injustice in my view, and completely unfair to female athletes.
Completely unfair. Of course they're winning, because as the science tells us, which I know we like to pick and choose when we want to follow science, it was all about the science at the beginning of the pandemic, and now they don't
My
want us
body,
to talk
my
about the
choice.
science, right? Yeah, all of the things. This is the most blatant issue. This isn't even about an opinion about a vaccine like I had or a mandate. This is males versus females from the beginning of time, and how men are stronger. You are, and it's okay. I don't want to have your body, you know? You don't want to have mine. Like, it's okay. You can't have children, despite what they try to say. That's us. We win that, you know?
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, all that comes with it, you don't want to.
Good luck with that.
Like, yeah. But it's the biggest blessing of my life.
Yes.
That our differences should be celebrated. I now know, I realize my strength now. I know how strong I am mentally, spiritually, and to be able to stand up and push through my own fears, and there are many, to stand up for what I believe in. And also, though, I also grew up with a very strong father who was so supportive of my mother and celebrated my mother while protecting my mother and being a real man. And that's what I grew up around. That's what I believe.
And a man of faith.
A man of faith. And that's what I want in my life for my daughters to have, for my son to be, to his future wife someday, you know?
Of course.
And I'm not going to give up on that, because it's real, and it's actually, I believe, one huge thing that is lacking in this country, because men have been made smaller and made to feel guilty about every single thing.
Ridiculed.
White men in particular, like all
every
of the things.
sitcom you watch, the dad is the butt of jokes. Men are ridiculed now.
And we need you. I need you. You know what I mean? Like, I think that to be celebrating not just women, but then, let's forget about it when it comes to the transgender sports issue, you know, Title IX, like all this, we're gonna forget. But I need you, you need us. And you look at statistics.
That's how God made us.
Of course.
We need each other.
Of course. But when you look at statistics in any community, in the Black community, we see this a lot. Bill Cosby, before we found out truth about Bill Cosby, but back when he was everybody's, you know, America's favorite father, he spoke about this, and the statistics of, you know, the Black community, and if 72%, I think it is, of children are born out of wedlock.
Yes.
And the facts, the research that has proven what that does to any kid, any race, it doesn't matter, black, white, green, whatever, when there isn't a two-parent household, you know, when there isn't a mother and a father present, there's a difference. And to me, I do feel that there's hope, because I think a lot of people are like us who just want, you live your life, I'll live mine, let's be respectful and kind. And hopefully, I mean, listen, my decision to get divorced was the most devastating decision of my life.
Of course.
Devastating. Married for 20 years, together for 27, first boyfriend, all the things. Like, it's not what I dreamt of. Oh my gosh, it's devastating. Story for another day. My kids were much older, and my ex-husband and I are very good co-parents and are respectful and making it work, because we love our children, you know? Right. And so I feel fortunate for our situation that we've worked hard for. Otherwise, we must continue to strive for the families to stay together. And that's where it begins. That's why I think things are a mess, along with this being a very spiritual battle with a lot of evil out there that we've got to combat. And if it means just little old me at ESPN standing up for that hypocrisy, there's some evil in that.
Oh, yes.
I have to do this. Like, I know now that if I don't, I won't be able to look in the mirror. Shame on me, because I was given this platform. I'm still in awe of it. And it still is humbling and scary at times, because I was just this kid who wanted to talk about football and basketball. But God has me here. And if I go quiet, what am I teaching my own kids or anyone else that's watching? So just because I did well and was successful and made some money, then I'm a sellout.
Yes.
Then I've lost perspective.
You gain the whole world, yet you lose your soul.
Yeah, and I've seen so many good people lose their souls because of the almighty dollar, because of fear. And I will empathize with the fear. I see why people are afraid to speak up. I do. I get it. And sometimes they probably shouldn't. You need to make sure you're prepared for what's to come, even though I can probably tell you you're not prepared, no matter how prepared you are.
God always seems to throw curveballs along the path.
Okay, when I went through a tough time in college, my mom gave me this framed photo, and the words in it said, "If you want to give God a good laugh, tell him your plans."
You
And
just
I
gave
was
me a
like,
good laugh.
right? And I'm like,
So true.
oh boy, because didn't we all have our lives planned out?
Oh,
I'm gonna
my
graduate at
gosh.
22. I'm gonna get my first job. I'm gonna get married at 30.
Yeah.
First kid at 32. Like, really?
So true.
Just get over yourself. It's not about us.
Rarely do my plans align with God's plan, but his plan's always good, always better, no doubt.
When you're in it, though, you question it.
Yes, you do. God, where is this going? Then in hindsight, you say, that's why I didn't take the ESPN job then. That's why I needed to wait 3 years. Thank God I waited those 3 years, because then I was truly ready, had another child. It makes sense in hindsight all the time. You say, okay, God, I'll do it. I'll
Yes.
continue to do it your way. Your way works.
And that's why, when I was deciding, the night before the lawsuit dropped, April 28th, 2022, I spoke to each of my children. One was at college, one was a senior in high school, one was a sophomore. And I spoke to each one separately because I wanted them to be prepared.
It's
for what
traumatic
was to
for
come.
them, too.
Very. I wanted them to be prepared for what was to come, because in the past they've been attacked on social media too. They go find your kids, is what they do. And so I said, I just want you to know that you don't have to defend me. Don't ever feel the need to defend me. No obligation. I would ask that all you say, if someone says something, teachers would say things to my kids, like coaches, just stop. And so I said, just say, you know what? We all have a right to our own opinion, and my mom has hers. Don't say anything else that you don't want to say. I don't need you to do that. I got it. And so each kid had a kind of a different reaction, pretty supportive. My youngest daughter was the youngest and scared and just wanted to just want to go to high school and have a normal mom. Would you shut up?
Be left alone, right?
Yeah. My son, who's in the middle of the two crazy girls, and is a little more like, he observes, he stays a little quieter. I said, but this is happening tomorrow, and I just want to apologize if something comes at you, but I have to do this. I was crying. He put down what he was doing, he looked at me, and my son said, Mom, it's about time you stood up for yourself.
Wow.
I thought this whole time I was protecting them by staying quiet.
Yeah.
I thought I was doing the right thing. And in the meantime, he'd been watching me get quiet and make myself smaller. And I was in awe of him for saying that. So I knew at that moment that no matter if I lost the lawsuit, either way, I'm going to lose my job. Mm-hmm. At least I stood up. At least my kids, my son in that moment, saw that his mom wasn't going to be silent for something that was wrong. So that right there, our kids see everything. I thought I was a better actress,
yes.
right? With all of it,
100%.
they see how we allow our spouses to treat us, how we treat our spouses, how we treat the neighbor, how we are at work, all of the things. And for my son, my 17-year-old son at that point, to say it's about time, I knew I'd be okay.
Yes.
I knew I was going to be okay because
once he was on board, once your kids are on board.
No, I'm not saying they liked it. I'm saying he understood it.
He understood it. Yeah. Well, you inspired and encouraged your own kids. You're inspiring and encouraging kids, young ladies, young men around the world, not only in the United States right now, Sage, just from our conversation. I've held you for a long time here. We could go for like another 3 hours.
I love talking to you. I know.
It's great.
We have a lot to talk about. We have to talk about Jordan LeBron debates or whatever.
We do. I want to talk sports on a separate podcast, just kind of offline. By the way, your mom, we talked a lot about your dad, but your mom, Irish and Italian.
Yeah.
My wife, Irish and Italian.
Beautiful.
So I'm sure your mom is feisty and tough,
oh
right?
Oh my gosh. Get out. Listen, my dad was a retired colonel, is a retired colonel. They called my mom the general.
Sounds
Mona's
about
in
right.
charge. And I'll tell you this, my grandmother's name was Philomena Lena DiPertola.
Wow.
Okay? And my grandfather was a William Edward O'Neill. So the DiPertola O'Neill, I mean, how much more Irish and Italian can that get?
Oh my gosh.
So when Mona gets upset, when someone wrongs Mona's daughter,
hey, I'm about 6'4.5". My wife is about 5'3".
oh wow.
But I don't mess with her.
She's in
tough.
charge.
And her maiden name is Caraccio.
Oh, that's
a good
beautiful.
paisan.
Caraccio.
Yes, Caraccio.
I love it. We know who's in charge in your house.
100%. My mom's parents were off the boat, as we used to say, from Ireland. from Western Ireland. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Awesome. That's this country. That's what we're made up
yes,
of.
it's
you
the
know?
American dream.
That's diversity.
Yes,
It
and we're trying to
is.
keep that alive right now. You're trying to keep it alive. Yeah, God has opened an amazing door for you now.
Yeah.
And to me, you're in an exciting place in life, Sage. I mean, it's an open canvas right now.
It's weird.
And yeah, it's got to be weird, kind of liberating. I mean, you're 16, 17 years at ESPN, the same company. Now you can kind of say what you want. You're not looking over your shoulder, and there's endless possibilities ahead of you. You're in a great place.
I agree. Thank you. I didn't think this is how I would get there.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to be a lifer. I really didn't think. When you're an Army kid and everything is move, 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 and then for the 16 years, the way I grew up, that's unheard of. And I told the bosses I always wanted to stay there. I never wanted another job, but God had other plans.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the other jobs are. I'm trying to create things and do those things on my own now.
Got the podcast coming?
Yeah, I have I'm still doing that on my own. I'm trying to start a little YouTube channel with me and my best friend, and we're idiots. The stuff we
all
talk
good.
about, she knows all the dirt on me, so she can mock me and all the things. Other things I haven't really announced yet, but fun stuff to be able to have conversations with people who are willing to. Not everybody is willing to. What I really want is for people to feel comfortable, hopefully with me, to share some adversity. Because I've noticed that every time I've come out and talked about, even if it's about my personal life with my divorce, which I've not talked about publicly, it's still very sensitive, and I'm respectful of my kids and him. And but when I have mentioned it, there's so many people who'll reach out, strangers, who all of a sudden don't feel alone. Because if you're a public figure, especially if you're on TV, and then it's like, oh, okay, great. Yes, makeup and hair and fun interviews, and you have this glamorous lifestyle, and everything's perfect, right?
No.
It's not perfect. And I've never tried to portray that. My social media, my Instagram in particular, is very like, the dog pooped in the living room again.
Right,
oh my
exactly.
goodness. Like,
I'm taking out the trash.
yes, because who wants to, like, that's just not,
No.
Look, the jeans, I've been wearing dresses and 4-inch heels for 30 years. This is what you get, right?
This is good.
So when people share who they are and can share their struggles, you bond over that.
A vulnerability too.
I hope I can get some big names to share some of that pain, because out of the pain usually comes what? Some good.
It's good.
Yeah.
And many times what evil people meant for evil, God uses for good. And he's doing that with you.
He is. What a
More to come.
What a
Hey,
blessing.
this was great. Thank you so much. We need to do it again.
I'd love to.
We're going to pray for your dad. We're going to keep praying for your dad. I'm
Thank you.
so glad you shared that, Sage.
and my
Because we've
mom,
got
if you don't
prayer
mind.
warriors. Of course.
The caregiver is such an issue. And I think, unfortunately, millions of people understand that. When one spouse or a child, a parent, there's always someone else that's there to care for them, and we forget sometimes about them.
Yeah.
But my parents are my everything, and I would love the prayer warriors to add Mona and Gary Steele to their.
Mona and Gary Steele and Sage Steele and your family. We're praying for all your future endeavors, and
Thank you.
great things lie ahead, Sage. Hey, thanks so much for joining us here today on the inaugural edition of the Stacks Cast.
Oh my gosh.
Couldn't think of a better first
I
guest,
am
Sage.
honored.
Hey,
Thank
honor to have
you.
you. God bless you.
And now
Sage.
you're
Thank
kind of
you.
stuck with me now.
Hey, I know. We're going to be doing this more in the future.
Thank
God bless
you.
you, Sage.
God
Thank you.
bless you.